Good evening, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Jodi Hammer, and I'm the Career Services Specialist for the National Peace Corps Association's Global Reentry Program. And as such, I have the honor of working with RPCVs like you all on a variety of themes and career topics and such. So I'm excited to be here tonight. We're going to actually spend some time talking about um we're going to talk about like updating kind of it's the new year, it's the people are generally they have new career goals, or their goal might be to get a job, right? If you've been struggling in these COVID crazy times, you're really kind of wanting to do what it takes to get that job, and some of that that we're going to talk about really tonight, we're going to focus more on the resume and maybe some of the things that you might be able to tweak and you might consider using as alternatives to what you've been using that might help you get a little more attention or get you to that interview stage, right? Where you're called. Because let's face it, the resume is really to get you the interview, not the end job, because they're going to interview you and see if you're the right candidate and all of those things. But you've got to get beyond that initial screening. And so if your resume, isn't getting you there, you're not getting, maybe any callbacks. It could be in part, a terrible economy, right? And certain industries that might be, impacted and such. But it could also be partially, at least, impacted by maybe you're underselling yourself in your resume, which I see far too often. With RPCVs, we tend to be humble and not wanting to like overstate what we did, and so oftentimes, you might not put it, in the extent. And when I talk to people about it, it's like, well, wait a minute, you did this, so you wrote, received, and managed that grant. Okay, well, yeah, I mean, so people need to take credit where credit is due as well. So I am just going to right now try to share my screen, and we're gonna get this up and going. All righty, and let's start. Can everyone see it? I hope. Maybe you can nod if you can see the awesome thumbs up. Love it. All right. So, new year, new you. Updating your resume for success in 2021. I think it's going to be a much better year. Let's just hope, right? With where we are and where we're hopefully going with vaccines and all of that. So um, I I very much hope it's going to be a better year and more opportunities economically, of course, for individuals, and just a better year overall. So we're going to talk about that. So I have a little just a little cartoon here for you, to start it off. So sometimes I'm sure none of you have stuff I totally rocked, right? um, but we're going to talk about, some of the things like how do you even title certain sections of your resume to help them see it as more professional. For example, we'll talk about, one of the areas, what can you include to, you know, help them see that you are in, the latest of, technology and, that kind of stuff. So you can do little things to your resume. So it's not always this overhaul, right? And I want you to rest assured, it's not like I'm going to tell you to, throw your resume out and just start from scratch, because chances are you have a pretty good comprehensive resume of what you did, right? And so now it's going to be more, how do you tweak that and maybe emphasize certain aspects of the resume, like your accomplishments, including those numbers, some of those things that really are so important to make it more digestible to that hiring official that, sees, how many, resumes, and they spend how many seconds, Ron? I think the last I had heard it was like 7 to 10 seconds on a resume to determine whether it was going to be going to that to be considered further pile, or the, as I always call it, the circular file, aka trash. So yeah, so I think we're gonna, I'm not here to tell you that you have to like absolutely overhaul your resume. I'm just here to share with you some tips and advice and some of the latest tips, going into, 2021. And what are they saying in the industry? What kinds of, how have things changed? Because things do change over time, right? If you're still, giving the same advice, or you're still, things are the exact same, and you heard that maybe, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, right? Even, or a couple of years ago, it could be somewhat outdated. So you want to always be willing to, look at how can you make it, in the most impactful way. Okay. So that's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to look, I want to look just really quickly at the resume style. I want to address this first and foremost because there's a lot of confusion on what resume styles like are out there. A lot of people will use CV interchangeably with resume, and they're not the same. Okay. The CV is definitely more used for academia. So if you are going into academia, you may well be doing a CV, and it's, longer, I mean, as many pages as needed as it says here. It's definitely more comprehensive information. It's what's used almost everywhere else in the world besides the States, right? We use the resume, which is typically that 1 to 2 pages. Now, obviously, there's, exceptions on that too, sometimes, right? Depending if you're going for a very seasoned job, they may want 20 years of experience showing, and that may not, you might have to have, a little bit longer. Or federal resume, if you're using the USA resume builder, you're definitely going over that 2 pages. That thing is, I mean, yeah, it's very long, but that's an exception. Okay. um so we're going to be talking tonight more about the resume, and if you have some questions on CV, you can certainly reach out to me afterwards. You can always reach me at careers@peacecorpsconnect.org very easily, or Jodi at Peace Corps. Actually, Jodi at rpcv.org is even easier. It's the shortened version instead of peacecorpsconnect.org. So so yeah, you're welcome. You're definitely welcome to reach out to me for those. But let's go forth. This is just a graphic from one of my favorite sources, actually, the Balance Careers. And I don't know, Ron, if you're I'm sure familiar with them as well. They do so many good I'm really impressed with their graphics. Like, they obviously have somebody there whose job is to make all of these really nice, they'll do infographics, they'll do, just really colorful and breaking down steps. And so I love them, and I would highly recommend that you check out The Balanced Career. And if you just do a Google, you'll get to it. They actually do have a career guide, which is really good. It talks about resumes. There's a part on interviewing. There's a part on, there's some really good, and they stay up to date. I mean, they're always writing. Their lead person has been there for years. Like, I'm not remembering her name right now. I want to say it's Allison something. But just they're so good at staying up to date on different things. So I would definitely check them out. But this just shows you really quickly the different types. It's really confusing, right? When people talk about resumes, the standard resume is a reverse chronological. So meaning your most recent is going to be first, and then your experience goes back, because that's what they care more about, the more recent experience than the older experience. And so you do it reverse chronological. And that's what we're going to be spending a lot of time on in terms of tonight, in terms of the different categories and how you might be able to make it pop more or get more, response for your, efforts. But the functional more focuses on your skill experience, which is great as well. I think there's definitely a time and place for a functional resume. And I think, if I remember correctly, Ron, you use a functional, or it might be the mixed version combination, which I talk a lot about to folks. The functional resume, you really don't even have your jobs listed like up front, right? Instead, you have categories, like what are the categories in that job that you're going for? Is project management one of the categories? Is planning? I mean, what are those things? And then that would dictate what you're putting as your category headers, right? Up front, your specialized kind of skills that you're focusing on, right? And then underneath that, in the bullets, you list in whatever order you want. And this is the benefit of the functional. You don't have to wait to describe that job that was very applicable, that was 10 years ago, further down. You can actually have that bullet. You're not saying what job it's even with. You're just saying what you did, or what you accomplished, or what the bullet is, right? And then the other bullet, so in whatever order it is, it's just under the skills, sections, right? And then you do have you do still have a work history area, but it's called work history. And all it is a skeleton of your organization, the location, your job title, and the dates. That's it. No meat, no bullets, no summary, nothing under it. Because theoretically, you have put everything into the appropriate paid, place on the up front in that. So that's the truly functional, right? And then you have this combination where it blends both of them, where you put skill sets within your different jobs. So you have it reverse chronological, right, with most recent first in the jobs, but you have these like program management or whatever into incorporated into those experience entries. And you always include accomplishments and your outcomes, which I'm actually a big believer in anyway. Even a strict, straight chronological resume, and I'll talk about this later. I highly encourage you to talk about outcomes, whatever it was. And the numbers are so, even if it's a small, you feel like, oh, it wasn't like it was 50%, it was, 15. It doesn't matter. It makes it more believable and more, like you're able to come up with that specific. Um, so we'll talk about that as well. And then now, the one thing I will say about this graphic, like, I mean, nothing's perfect, right? I mean, everyone has their preferences. Like this targeted one, to me, whatever choice you make, you're always targeting your resume, right? Like, so this makes it seem like, oh, this is a special type of resume that you would just target for a specific job. But you would always target your resume, right, for any job. So whether it's going to be a chronological, a combination, or a functional resume, right? And then nowadays, there are some unique, non-traditional types of resumes as well. The video resume, for example, as per the icon on the bottom right here of the screen, there now that's a whole different right can of worms. And it's not something that I would say, oh, you need to spend all this time preparing for that, because that's quite rare depending on your industry. In most industries, it's not as used, but if you are asked to do one, do your due diligence, and research, video resume, how to create a effective video resume, and you'll get a lot of really good tools as well, because things are changing. I mean, there was no such thing as a video resume, even 5-10 years ago. You wouldn't have thought of a video resume. So all right, it's just becoming a little more common. So let's talk about the header. And I really want to make sure that folks are able and willing to, put in when you have questions, drop them into the chat box, and I will get to as many of the questions as possible. There's always, a lot to cover with resumes, but I want to make sure that this is getting to meet your needs. So if you do have questions, yeah, we are doing a Q&A, Allison. Thank you for asking. And how do you add those magic metrics to your current job? Yes, that's great. For you, they change, you're saying, right? And then +2, my responsibilities shifted due to COVID. Absolutely. Everyone understands, Allison, that the responsibilities because of COVID changed. I mean, people lost their jobs altogether, or they were put into a different, capacity, all of that. So I think that is something that like when you're they're going to know that you might even put a bullet, assumed XYZ role due to COVID pandemic. I mean, you could certainly put that in there even as a bullet, right? But when you talk about the metrics, I think the way that you add those magic metrics is first to record them. I mean, even if sometimes they're not necessarily forcing you to record them, but a lot of times you do need to, but it's getting to the accurate ones. And then, okay, how can I best put this on my resume in a way that would most help in highlighting my accomplishments. So it's not always like when I said to people who were in the evacuated because of COVID, right? The evacuees, but also people who maybe had their service shortened, maybe medically, or who knows, right? And had to come home sooner than expected. They a lot of times would say to me, gosh, I didn't have a chance to do XYZ and get all these metrics and all that. And I totally get that. It depends on your experience, but you certainly need to take credit for what you did do. And anyone who swore in as a volunteer has 3 months of that intensive educational training, where they're training you in the PACA methodology or whatever, right? For your communities to use it, your assessment, all talk about that kind of thing, right? So definitely consider, working in whatever you were able to do. Just because you didn't get a grant doesn't mean you can't put in that you wrote a grant. So, instead of wrote, received, and managed, or wrote a successful grant for to, and then putting what it was for, you could certainly put authored grant to You're not saying you got it, but you authored it. And was it a USAID funded grant? What is the kind? Why am I blanking? There's PEPFAR. PEPFAR is the USAID grant, right? USAID sponsored grant. So you could put even those buzzwords, like that really helps you in terms of making yourself more marketable, right? How many of you are looking for jobs in international development, right? Raise your hands, anyone or somewhat, right? Typically, that's one of the most popular sectors that I see people wanting to work in. And so putting those kinds of things down, that you did the grants, they always need to know, the grant writing and grant management and all those kinds of things. So incorporate that skill set into your resume if you're going for that international development. And by the way, just as a reminder to anyone who doesn't know, and we'll be really spreading this a lot this month, February 4th, SID Washington, the Society for International Development, they're a great organization. They are going to be sponsoring a virtual career fair specifically targeting international development. And they have, I think, a lot of people that are organizations already scheduled to be in attendance virtually. So my point is, so look for that information in the next Global Reentry, newsletter, and certainly, we'll get it out there. I'll get it out there on the other Facebook groups and such as well. But mark your calendar, February 4th, and I think it's 11 to 3, if I'm not mistaken. And they're going to have, they actually might be doing something specifically for, and you're going to have free access. So you're not going to pay the registration fees. So they agreed to do that, as they're big supporters of RPCVs, and we talked with them, and they said, we'd really love to do something to help out, and we'd be happy to have RPCVs come to the career fair, and not have to pay for it. Of course, they might be doing a specific like I'm going back to my Spanish here, charla, a little, talk, whatever, a presentation. They may do one specific to RPCVs, or I think how we left it was that maybe after, as a follow-up to that career fair, doing something specific only for the RPCVs. And that'll probably be like a podcast dedicated to that. So just stay tuned for that as well. But anyway, so my point, and this was an excellent example for international development, for example, you could make sure that you put in those kinds of accomplishments and those kinds of things that you did. So great. Okay. And yes, who's sponsoring it is Society for International Development, SID. Yep. And they're great. It's their chapter, their Washington chapter that's actually really doing it. So awesome. Okay. So let's talk then about your header, right? Standardly, your header includes, your name. Your name is typically the biggest thing, or it should be the biggest thing on the page. So if it's not, that's something that you could do to tweak to really help just make it pop. You want to make it pop, right? And then it has your address. Now this has changed over the years as well. Not even so long ago, it was always, you would put your street address and your, city, state, and all of that. And you'd try to have a local address if you could, and blah, blah, blah. Nowadays, the latest trend is against the actual city and state. Like, you don't need to do that, I guess. It's not an expectation typically, except in maybe, for example, federal applications. And again, that's all different federal resume writing. I'm talking about the regular kind. But so putting just your city and state is fine. You don't have to put the whole address. You technically don't necessarily even have to have city and state. If you're applying for a job in the city or state that you live in, I would say absolutely include your city and state to show them that you're an insider, that you're already there. I mean, that's half the battle oftentimes, right? When they're doing all of the recruitment that's, online, people are applying from so far away, and they want maybe somebody who already knows the city, the region, whatever. But don't worry, if you're applying from afar, you certainly don't have to put that, right? Now, some people will, and I remember talking to people about this, again, even a couple of years ago, where, you'd be talking about, okay, so you don't want your address to rule you out, if you're, living in, Iowa. I'm from Iowa, so I can say this, right? And you're trying to get a job in California or DC. That's a long way away, right? It's a lot different there. Are they going to like it? In their mind, it's like, wow, will they like it? It's a lot different there, whatever. So, if I did have an address in the local area here that it's my address that I would be going to initially, like, staying with a friend who's based in DC while I get my, bearings and all of that, you could certainly, the thought was you could put a local address in that way. But because now with the whole address being so optional, you don't have to worry about it maybe as much. And let's face it, employers have also learned. I mean, teleworking has really worked. I mean, yes, a lot of people, including myself, are ready to go to the office, ready for that connection. But they've definitely learned the lesson that people can be effective wherever they are. They might be more open to even bringing on people, maybe if it even is remote, initially or whatever. So something else to think about. And yes, you do need to put your phone number. And I know that there's many people out there that hate talking on the phone. They're like all about just the texting and the like messaging and all of that. But you need to put your phone number. They need to be able to get a hold of you to schedule an interview. And if you don't have a phone or phone number, you can. I mean, there are services, and I think there are some free ones where you basically have a number, but it's like you get an email or whatever saying, that they're, calling you, or it's a message or something like that. But my point is, put your phone number down. And it does not matter. A lot of people are like, oh, if I'm trying to move to, San Francisco, I should have a, 415 or whatever, area code number. They'll know that I'm not local by this number. Hardly anyone changes updates their phone numbers. Like I've had mine for years and years, right? Since I lived in DC, and I'm now, in the metro area still, but in Maryland, I'm not going to change it. Like it's, most people don't change it. So don't worry about that either. But those are the standard things that are included, right? But how can you maybe update or tweak it, right, to get more impact? So maybe I would say consider adding, and I would say in general, this should be a par for the course thing these days, putting your LinkedIn URL. And if you're doing a job search and you don't have LinkedIn, I would encourage you to open an account. It's free. It's fairly easy to navigate. You don't have to have it really, really robust, but it can help you exponentially in identifying and contacts and growing your network. And let's face it, in today's age, and especially, but in general, I mean, it networking is the key to your success, right? It is a very central key to your success. And so LinkedIn helps to connect you to other people. And it doesn't have to be in a lot of people hear the word networking and they think slimy people just, using people for, whatever. It doesn't have to, it's not that necessarily. It's really about connection and connecting to other people and learning about them. They learn about you, and it's kind of, wow, oh, I just saw something that reminds me of that person. Let me just send it to them. They might, they might enjoy that. They love, M&E, monitoring evaluation, that kind of thing. You can, follow up and send things. And that means a lot when people get these follow-ups, like if they take the time to do, a career chat, right? Not an informational interview. I just hate the term informational interview because it just sounds so long and, oh, it's going to take an hour. Whereas career chat just is quick. It doesn't sound long, right? So, when you ask for, wondering if you might have 15, 20 minutes of your time to chat at your convenience. I'd love to learn a little more about your own experience and tips and advice you might have for me, right? So it's really helpful. It's a helpful tool. And that's all I'm going to say because I have a whole other webinar on networking and you can watch those later. But do your LinkedIn URL and shorten it. And the way that you shorten it, you go to your profile and you look and you'll see the little pencil kind of thing, and you can buy where it has, because it standardly defaults to I don't know what the logic is, but it's like some of your name and then it's all these letters and numbers, and there's just no logic to it, right? It's impossible to remember. So try to change it to your name after, LinkedIn, whatever, slash, and then just put your name. Your name may be taken. So maybe consider a middle initial or a number or something at the end, whatever, until you get one. It'll tell you when it's available and you can take it. So do that, because then it's a lot shorter to put on your resume as well. And it's a lot more memorable. Oh, send me a message on LinkedIn. It's just, Jodi Hammer or Jodi Hammer one, whatever, right? So it's much easier for you to network as well. But consider including that in your header. And then other social media. So some people, depending, might put Twitter, they might put, I'm not a big fan of putting Facebook on, because I think Facebook, I view Facebook as that's more of my personal, like my Facebook, account, whatever. I'm not using it as much, not that you can't, but LinkedIn is more of that professional kind of version of Facebook, if you will, right? So whatever social media you use, I mean, if you're going into social media or, media planning, all of that, absolutely, you're going to want to have all of those social media ones showing, right? Instagram, all of them, so that they know that you're comfortable with and can maneuver through all of those. And then lastly, on the header, consider using a tagline to describe yourself. And this can be right after your name. It can be, or it can be, right before you go into, and we're going to talk about, maybe some of the key qualifications or summary of qualifications, whatever. But it's just your header. It should be very short, and it should describe you like as related to the job that you're going for, right? And just very, very, kind of short and sweet. So, bilingual educator with, specializing in whatever, like something where it's they see it and it's like they know what you bring to the table, if you will, right? That tagline. You can't include everything. Obviously, that's what your resume and other things are for, to augment that. But your tagline, something that can be really helpful, especially when maybe your experience or your job titles are not as applicable, they're not as related to what you're going for. So having that kind of, a lot of times people will say, actually include in that header or right up front, that job title you're going for, project manager or whatever, with, strong, so that they see that there as well. But yeah, so that's up to you, but that can help. I think that can help get some more attention, just, putting that kind of thing. Are there any questions so far on taglines or the kind of resumes? It's already, my goodness, time goes so fast when we talk resumes. It's already 8:36. My goodness. Okay, so summary versus quality. So summary of qualifications or key qualifications are two that you might use, and they're similar, right? Versus an objective, and we're going to talk about both of those. So here you can see on the left, you'll see the resume summary. So this would be like, either you could have it be called summary of qualifications, or just professional summary, or summary, whatever, right? And this is just an example that I got from Indeed, and you can see on the bottom there, it's from, and Indeed is great. They have the Indeed career guide that's really good. Check that out as well. But so the summary is basically, a very short description, right? Or the kinds of why you're a good fit. So it really is more of your skills, right? And achievements, it might be, right? So, and this example they use is, maintenance mechanic. So analytically driven maintenance mechanic with 5+ years of experience focusing on intricacies of equipment and instrumentation. Like, boom, right? That tells you what, like, there's and I always talk about being an adjective and a noun with, and then this follows it perfectly, 5 with whatever X years of experience in, and whatever, with special focus on, or specialized knowledge in whatever, to get that right up front so they see that. Okay, as opposed to the resume objective. The objective is more of a statement that shares it's more about what the job seeker's looking for, right? What are your career goals? So if you're using a resume objective, it's oftentimes more like what you're looking for, what you want to, right? So there's an example that they share with assistant manager, right? Objective to be hired at an assistant management position with an innovative employer in the manufacturing industry, preferably, said position. Right there, that's my keyword that I hate, the keywords, that phrase, opportunity for advancement and growth. Because I don't know if you remember this, Ron, but there were the days where everyone used objectives. It was what we were supposed to use, and I remember those days very well. And it was objective, and it got so tiring because people would say a rewarding position with opportunities for advancement and growth. It was just so generic, and it was like, what are you telling me? Like, nothing. Like, of course you want, anyway, you're not going to put a boring position with, I mean, of course you're going to need that. So it doesn't tell me, the person, anything, the person that's reviewing it. And your resume, I challenge you to look at your resume as valuable real estate space. Okay. Every line on it is valuable real estate, right? And so you want to make sure to make the best out of every single line that you have on your resume. You don't have room for fluff. You don't have room for, this extra waste of space. Okay. So which style do you think I'm going to advocate for you to use? Is it obvious? Let's see. I don't know. Of course, right? So I'm going to definitely advocate for more of the summary of qualifications or key qualifications because it's more meeting their needs, the employer. It's talking about how you can help them resolve an issue, achieve a goal, what you bring to the table, and why you should be considered further. So I just think it's a lot stronger. So okay, so let's look really quickly here. Resume sample that's using a skill summary right up front. Okay. So this is one of your options, right? You could call it a skill summary. You could call it a summary of qualifications, key qualifications. Of all of them, I think they're all fine. I do lean toward qualification, key qualifications only because in my mind, when you see key qualifications, it reads, there's a lot of qualifications, but these are the key ones. So I tend to like that better. So, I mean, that's a very little tweak, but I think that can be really helpful. But you can see here that you can see how they have their header up front, right? Now they do have their detailed, like I said, you can totally have it detailed if you want it. You don't need to, so it's totally up to you. And their phone number and their email too, right? As well, so their contact information. But the skills summary, look at how they have each of the first, like the bullets, there's a word in bold. That is the skill, right? That is the skill set that they're putting out there as these are my main skills that are going to help you meet your needs. So obviously you need to, when you tailor your resume to each and every job, which you do, you're going to want to put, you can develop a master one where you have all kinds of these, there, but you pick the ones that are most applicable and use those. And the great thing about this is it prevents you from having to start over at ground zero every time. I recommend to my clients, and Ron, I'm fairly certain you probably do the same, when you're applying for a job, you go back to your files and you choose the resume that you submitted for the job that's most similar, and you start with that as your base. And then from there you tweak it, and you add different things, and you make sure that it has the kinds of skills that the required or desired, or the main skills that the job is looking for. It's going to make it much more tailored and much more powerful to get there. I mean, I always say this is your area where you hook them, right? You hook them right up front with spotlighting these kind of skills, which really helps, especially when your most recent job experience might not have many of the elements that they're looking for. So that can really help. And quantifying sometimes, with the number of years of experience you might have in a certain, or number of years of experience in this skill set or whatever, can be helpful as well. So see how they have communication and then award-winning customer service skills, deals with internal and external customers at all levels, da 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 da. Great. So it gets that information, right? Problem solving, resolves in-depth queries in a methodical manner. Now, the one thing I would say about this, I'm a fan of speaking in the first person, past tense, or the first person, like singular. So when I read like deals with, or that's really the he she, right? Tense, he deals with, she deals with, not I deals with. So I oftentimes encourage people, and it's totally up to you, just be consistent. I generally advocate for more of writing it in the I verb, I tense, and then take out the I. And just that way, it's more of a statement of you, and it's not this like she deals with that she. I don't know what you recommend, Ron, if you have a stance on it or if you're flexible, but you're welcome to chime in here. Oh, you're on mute. It's that darn mute, I tell you.
Yeah, it should be first person, not third person.
Yep.
Otherwise, it reads like a job description.
Exactly. Thank you, Ron. Exactly. So good. We're on the same page with that one then. So, but this gives you, I hope, an idea of how you can see, the problem solving, team player, planning, organization, all of those kinds of things can be really helpful. Now, I have seen a different approach as well. And I don't have a screenshot of it, but sometimes if people are if they find that their resume, like, wow, they just fit it onto the one or the two pages, and it's very meaty, so it's hard, even though they have bullets, right? It's pretty hard to, it's like dense. Sometimes I've recommended to people, well, what you might do, let's say you don't have space for an entire, and you don't have to have this many, skills either that are listed up front. Could be key skills or, key qualifications summary, whatever. You could, as an option, bold those words that are specific, like the program management, when you see that when you're writing in your other, in your bullets, going on, or in your cover letter. I advise that a lot in cover letters, more when they're a really meaty cover letter and they just had a hard time getting it down. At least bolding those key skill things like this, team player planning, when you refer to it, it allows them to be able to scan through that dense document and see those pop. So I think that's another tip for moving into the new year as well, to think about, and that's related to cover letters. But great. Any questions at this point? Let's see. Oh, Kensley, good question. At what point should I take my college internships and research off my resume? Okay, I'm going to hold off on that only because when we get to the education one, I promise I will, and ask it again if I don't, but I will remember. Okay. Now we do have the Casey as well. Or Kensley, sorry. You said I have Peace Corps under professional experience. Absolutely. Absolutely. Alongside your jobs, that Peace Corps was a job. And trust me, I mean, I love, my favorite phrase for Peace Corps, their whole logo, whatever, was the toughest job you'll ever love. It is a job. It is professional. Don't let anyone tell you it isn't. And you actually did get paid. I mean, it was a volunteer, but you got a stipend to pay for your expenses, right? That kind of thing. So yeah, no, absolutely. Put it under professional experience and be proud of it. And maybe, and I'm not saying that you hide this. I was very proud to be a Peace Corps volunteer. You might add, and this is another tip for going into the new year, of like maybe trying to have things, get response and stuff. You might consider adding or modifying your title. Like a lot of times people will have Peace Corps volunteer or just volunteer, Peace Corps, da, 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 da. Well, at least put, like, what kind of volunteer were you? Were you an urban agricultural volunteer? Were you a, rural health, specialist slash, community development, or, volunteer, whatever? You add a little more to it and it sounds better than just volunteer, right? Does that make sense? I hope. So yeah, and then the leadership and community service, nice. And I'm glad that you have that category. I'm a big fan of that. Leadership and community service, or some variation of that at the end, which we'll talk about in the very end here tonight. Putting your other things under that, absolutely. But Peace Corps was a job, absolutely. Okay, regardless of how long you were there. So for those that were evacuated within 6 months, even, definitely still put it there. And honestly, I would put, as one of your bullets, I would put as either the last bullet or the first bullet, probably the last bullet, evacuated March 2020 due to COVID-19 pandemic. People have a real, soft spot for, I can't tell you how many people were like, oh my gosh, I can't believe the Peace Corps volunteers were all evacuated. How awful. Like, people really identify with that. Like, they were, really felt bad for you. And trust me, they understand. If you're still looking right now, they understand. Many people are still looking right now. So please, don't lose hope about that either. Great. Awesome. All right. So let's go ahead to the next, which I have here, just a couple examples of sample resumes, right? The one on the left is more similar to what I have traditionally used. It's not one of mine or one of my clients, certainly. It's from online, but it's just a sample. So there are some things that I might take say, oh, I would prefer this or whatever. But in general, that's more of the traditional, right? That I used to add, that I do advocate for. But your header up front, your nice name and your, information. I like the information put like that across on one line with the dots or with the little squiggly, whatever that's called, between, so that it's a little more, it makes it more like a header, right? Because if you have an actual, when there's what is it? If you have a header or some kind of thing inserted, like a photo, whatever, it messes up the ATS, sometimes the automated tracking systems or whatever, when you send your resume in, given that for every job, there's, what the latest stat I think I heard was 276 resumes on average for every job. Like, wow, that is a lot of job. That's a lot of resumes, right? So they use these ATS systems, which are applicant tracking systems that allow them to suss through right away and kind of kick out if there's people that don't meet, that don't have the certain skills they're looking for, or whatever. They can just easily identify the best of the best, if you will, right? And forward them on. The problem is ATS systems, they're not always totally accurate either. So like if you have something, they say don't use like header types of things, because they don't get read. And so it can spit you out for the wrong reason, right? But that's why it's so important to write your resume. And I actually have a webinar on this that's already loaded up on the Global Reentry playlist of the NPCA YouTube station. And I think it's called Writing a Resume That Gets Through the ATS. And we talk more in detail about ATS and what it means, and how what's what you've heard and what to do and not to do. I mean, there was a time where I used to hear people would say, you just put all of their requirements on the bottom in white text on white. No, you don't. But people used to do that. And they thought, oh, it'll get me through the ATS and they won't even notice it. Yeah, you don't do that. So you may have been told that. And I remember there were many, many people who were doing that, but I would strongly encourage you not to, because if they do notice it, that screams, oh, they're just cheating. They're trying to, just get in, whatever. So that's how you can see professional summary, skills, whatever. This is like kind of, that might be a way to do it, alternative to what I was showing, on the last one. Work history, change that. Professional experience is what I would say, right? And then in whatever orders, be consistent. If it's, and whether or not, the other thing is, many of you might be like automatically putting the employer first, and then the location, and then on the next line, your job title and the dates. And that's fine. That's probably my default recommendation, but really it comes down to, as I say to clients, what is more impressive as related to the job? Your job title in general, right? Or your place of employment. And you can't switch back and forth. It has to be consistent. So I ask them that. And if they say, well, probably my titles, well, great. Then for you, you might want to be consistent and put your title, date, and then maybe on the next line, your organization and the place. Yeah, and for people who maybe, I've worked a lot with teachers, right? Who maybe have 10, 15 years of experience teaching, and they were great, and they are just ready for a change. And that's just fine. I totally understand that, especially these days, having a 7-year-old and trying to play teacher. It is so they're typecast if they have, if they put, like teacher. So then I would definitely have the place of employment and, whatnot, instead. So that's just one of the things I wanted to say there. And then your education at the bottom here, which we'll get to in a moment, but having, the one thing on this one, it doesn't really pop as much. I would, whatever is the first entry, like the first line, like your MBA or whatever it is, or the place you went or whatever, have that bolded usually, but that's just me. But or Master of Business Administration, have that bolded, and then have the next one bolded, whatever. But it's fine. And then on the other side, you see this is more of a I would say like more recent, like they've been moving in this direction more, where there's a little bit of like color pop, or something like that, right? But you don't want it to be a lot of color. You don't want it to be like the dark, because if you have like the a darker color, in the background, and then you're using your black, it might look fine when you're looking at it on a computer, but what about when they print it out? And they will, when they maybe are having, your interview or something, and then they can't even hardly read it. So you want to really be, I'm fine with a little bit of color, but I don't like too much, right? Now in this one, you see how it's kind of gridded out, and there's tons of templates that are out there. There are thousands, and I'm sure Ron can attest to this as well, that are out there, many of which are free. And I honestly think you can do one on your own free, using a template if you want to, or on your own, or whatever, right? Depending on your comfort level. But I don't think you should have to pay to have your resume done for you. Like a lot of places will say, oh, these are the templates, and we'll show you, but we'll do it for you. And I think you can do probably the best job. So here they have it broken up, like your professional summary up on the left, and then your work history, or professional experience, all of this on the left. But then notice what's over on the right you have like, that's where their contact information is. And then the skills. So it's kind of gridded. And I've seen some of the more recent ones too, even, you know how when you're looking at LinkedIn and you see the, like, where it'll say you've been recommended for XYZ, and there's all these, like, it'll say, like, it'll show almost a grid, or it's like a bar graph. And people will sometimes include even the bar graph of certain skill things, so it's very interesting. I'm still a little on the fence with some of that. But yeah, so I guess, Ron, not to put you on the spot, but I would love to hear a little bit about your own, just a couple minutes of your own thoughts on the newer styles that are coming out that are more gridded like this, and what tips or recommendations you have about those, whether for or against.
Well, first of all, I would tell Jessica always to have somebody proofread her resume. If you look on the work history district manager, she left off Verizon, the name of the company.
Ah,
And the point is, you cannot proofread your own resume.
right.
You have to have somebody else do that.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that. This is an example that was put up, like, just, one of the, many examples. And I didn't even really read the content much. I was more looking at the structure. But I
It's
wanted to
second
see that
nature to
there
me.
weren't any glaring, like, things, but that's absolutely right. You can't, it's so hard to catch it yourself, because you know what you're supposed to say, right? And what you mean. So it's very easy to avoid, to, maybe there's one word missing and you don't, catch it. So I'm sorry, Ron, are you saying something else?
No, go ahead.
That's fine. Okay. So yeah, so that's just the newer kind of style that you'll see as well. So kind of, think about it and look online. Some of my favorite sources for templates and for, career advice and good stuff are, I already said, the Balanced Career. I love the Muse, Muse, the Muse. They have, if you put in like interviewing tips, the Muse, or whatever your subject is, and then the Muse, you'll get some really great information as well. JobScan has some good stuff. Indeed has great, they have the career guide, resource guide that's free to access. And it's resumes, interviewing, everything. Trying to think of, those are I would say, some of my staples for my own when I'm looking for advice and such, because so much is out there and so much of it is great, but there's a lot of crap too. So you can, yeah, you don't want to be missteered either. So okay, someone has a question about their experience. They're saying, okay, I love it. That's why people hire me to edit their most important documents. That's fabulous. Great. And then, if you held two different positions within the same org, do you need to put the org both times? No, actually, when that's the case, that's one of the reasons I talk to people about, using, maybe listing your organization first and the location, because then on the next line, you have your most recent entry, your job title, I mean, and your dates, which to me makes sense to have those in the same line, right? Your job title and your dates, your organization that you worked for, and the location for it. And then the brief description, and then your past job description for a job title from that same organization, and you save a space, you save a line. You don't have to put another, the organization again. Some people do, but I kind of like having it together because it also emphasizes promotion, longevity, instead of, sometimes it could make you look like you are a job skipper, even though you're not. If you've been in your most recent one for 6 months and you're in the other one for, for maybe a year, they might think, oh, well, gosh. But when it's together, it's, oh, they're promoted, of course, and include in that most recent one, or in that first one that you were in, promoted to XYZ title, based on proven performance and dedication or whatever, so that they see, promoted. It's those kinds of key words that I'm talking about, and phrases that I think can make a big difference in how your resume comes across. And I want you all to, like, own this kind of a sense of confidence that you can do this, and you are capable of doing this. And if you have questions, obviously, reaching out is always an option too. So let's see, Haley's asking, oh yes, you added, yep, JobScan, Indeed, yep, Balanced Career, the Muse, those are great ones. Yes. JobScan's what you're missing. Yeah. And JobScan, very interesting. JobScan allows you to do a limited number. I thought it was 4, but I think it's varied. I know you can do at least one free, where you can do a resume. They call it, what's the term they used? It's a comparison. You dump your resume into a text box that they give you, then you dump the job description, and they tell you, oops, you're not getting there on this. You need to say more about leadership. You need to do this. You need to do. It is a fabulous tool. And you can do, I want to say it's 4 or 5 that you used to get. Maybe they've changed it, but I know you can at least do one to see how are you, and it's really good. And they do the same thing, I think, for cover letters. So just consider that as well. It's a really good one. Okay, how should you list an additional duty, Adrian's asking, that you do if it is not your main job title? Yeah, and how often is that, especially today? But in many, many times, you end up doing other jobs, especially like in a nonprofit or something, you might, you know, move into whether or not you want, you might be, you might assume additional duties. So I think you add them. I mean, literally, like, so you say took on duty of volunteer coordinator. So assumed duty of, or did they assign you that? Did they, entrust you with that? Entrusted to, serve as, or to take on duty of, volunteer coordinator, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, absolutely. I would work on how you phrase it so that they understand this is additional, above and beyond, or separate. We all have different parts of our jobs, though. Some are more related to the title and some are less. But yeah, assumed, volunteer coordinator, responsibilities, duties, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Let's see. Are there any that I've missed? The education one I promised I would come back to, and I know we're almost, wow, we are at 9 o'clock. Yikes. Okay. So let me see the education one. I want to, okay. So Kensley, I have not forgotten you. At what point should I take my college internship and research off my resume? For reference, I graduated in 2018 this is from undergrad. I'm saying, okay, and then went straight 2 years into Peace Corps, so still building up. Yeah, I would have that on there for a little while still, because 2018, you graduated in 2018 and then went into Peace Corps. You're still, a new professional. I think and I think honestly, internships, I think it more comes down to when do you get to the point where you have so many other jobs after it that it ends up making you go on to that second page or that third or whatever, where it doesn't fit anymore, or it becomes, typically, from what I understand, employers generally are looking at, they're more interested in your last 10 to 15 years of experience. So for you, you have plenty of years of experience left that they'll be looking back at that they would look back at your college internship. 20 years down the road, when you're doing, whatever, you may well not have that on there, because it's, not only you have a lot of other experience that would prove it, but also it may date you then. And so that's one of the things that you want to look at too. And we're getting to the education here right now. You want to look at, for the education, making sure that, like, if you've been out for quite a while, I've been out for years and years, right? From even my master's, putting dates on them actually can work against me, because they can see it as, oh, this is somebody who's, 50 plus, and, oh gosh, now they shouldn't do this, it's illegal. But they can think, oh, will they, will they want to retire? Will they, who knows, right? So you don't want to come across that. So you certainly can leave even your dates of your university eventually off. I wouldn't do that when you're I would leave it on for the most part, definitely for the first 10, maybe 15 years, whatever. But once you get to that 25 or 30-year mark, you probably, safe to say, you could leave off because by the time they see the education, because the education's after the experience, and this is key as well, a lot of people put their experience, in my mind, I'm sorry, I need to say, what I'm sharing with you tonight are my preferences and my advice for helping make it pop. I am not saying that I am the end all be all guru of resumes, and that it's my way or the highway. People have different reasons for choosing. For me, to me, having your education first and foremost screams new grad, no experience. So even if you are a new grad, no experience, do you really want that to be what they see? No, you want them to see the applicable, transferable skills that you've gained in Peace Corps and the other things before they get to that education, right? So for people that have their masters, now they may say, well, I want to put it up there because I have my master's. Well, you can get your master's into those key quals in the front, or that professional summary. Accomplished operations executive with MBA and 5 years of specialized experience, You can get that right up front. So why do you have to have your, your academia part, right? Your education part there. So I'm a big believer in putting the education after the professional experience, unless there's such a preference for certain universities, or it's, like that could be an exception. But in general, I would say you'll get further by having that down below, where you're emphasizing more of your skills and your experience. Okay. Um, so the other was, yeah, so I think we got that one. We have three recent ones really quickly, that I'm going to, here we go. Um, let's see. What if you started a PhD program? Okay, you can read this one really quickly. This is the, listed as professional experience, not just experience. It just sounds more professional to me. Or work history, definitely not. That's more like functional resume, where you're just going to get boom, 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 where you worked and when, not any details. So I prefer professional experience, but that's me. So wonderful. And then, using the STAR methodology, to think about and write your bullets. And by STAR methodology, and I have a slide on this, from another presentation, but the STAR methodology, right? So what's the situation, what's the task, what's the action, and what's the result, is how you think about that when you're thinking about how to write something. So the situation, this is, business, fraternity, whatever, but I mean, I would, like with Peace Corps, it might be, Peace Corps, volunteer, high incident of malnutrition, right? So what was the task? You wrote a grant, whatever. Action, what happened, right? What they received, how the rate of malnourishment went down by X%. That's the accomplishment, the outcome, right? So I'm just making this more transferable to Peace Corps versus the fraternity, right? But that's the STAR methodology. And that you can use that, and then you can do what I call skill statements. Sometimes your bullets end up, they just kind of, even if you're using the active ed action verbs, you might be repeating the same ones too much, where it gets, that gets old. Or it's just always did this, not did, but like, experience, or wrote, received, and monitored, blah 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 blah, achieved. But you can do skill statements, which is what I started with, this last word that I put out. Achieved a 23% decrease in malnourishment rates through organizing and implementing, da, 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 da. like that tells what you accomplished first, and then how you did it, right? So consider sometimes flipping it up so that it reads a little more, I don't know, it's a refreshing kind of change, right? Instead of always the ed action verb. Okay, so awesome. And let's see here. Yes. And then this is just, I had the example that I wanted to show you all, remember, about the resume that kind of is the combination of the mixed and the other, right? So you have, and again, from the internet, this is so, but you look at, the header part up top, and then see how this person, Joe applicant, has himself slated as education coordinator / supervisor. Chances are that's the job that he's going for, right? And then he's effectively managing staffs in both results oriented, high energy, with 10 years of experience, whatever, hands-on professional with, 10 years experience, successful, accomplishment, record of accomplishments, blah, blah, blah. Key skills, professional experience. So it's more, you can have in here, even, your professional experience, some of they included the notable accomplishments. And in this sense, they actually have it always say notable accomplishments, notable accomplishments. A lot of times when I'm talking to people, I say incorporated in, but it doesn't have to be like accomplishments, duties, because that just reminds me of when people used to put duties and then accomplishments. And you don't have to put really duties. You can say what the duties were within what you did, right? So that's my thoughts on that. Okay. So let's see if there are any. Sorry to go so quickly here. And I totally understand if people do have to drop off. I do want to let you know, if you want to download the chat, if there's been some valuable information in here that you don't want to lose, go to the chat box, and on the bottom right, the little 3 dots inside the square, and you click on that, and it'll say download chat, and it'll download it to whatever folder your Zoom is in. I don't know where it is, depending on if you're on, a phone or a device, whatever, a laptop. So that you can get that as well. Okay. And I'm going to put actually my, my email in here too. Are there any other questions? And I'm fine to stay on for a few minutes more. I just want to make sure that you feel free to leave whenever you need to if you do have to go. This is the final, the education, after it, how to update it. Like I was saying, you might really put some online courses that you took, right? And there's a lot of online courses and even certification ones that were offered during this time, which is, I think, one of the few kind of sunny sides, or I guess you know, the better part of what we've experienced. They've offered so much online, and so you can add those kinds of things. But dropping the graduation date, we've already talked about that, right? No high school, please. Regardless of how little time you have. I mean, the exception to that might be you're a teacher and you're applying to teach at the school that you went to high school. Well, then maybe, but only that. That would be my thoughts. Okay. Um, specialized skills then in the very end. Sometimes this is on the top though, as you did see in that example that we shared. How can you update and tweak it? You can, you definitely include your like language skills, relabeling some of your skills. You might, you might rework and decide which ones make sense to put in, like for certain things. People used to put, and they still could, like if you're certified in CPR, I mean, heck, it's always good to have someone who's certified in CPR, right? It's not going to necessarily be related to your job duty, but and sometimes that can pique interest and be a hook. Like, let's say you did your research and or somebody who works there, whatever, and you know that the person that's going to be reviewing resumes is a huge fan of fill in the blank, whatever it is. Well, that might be something, specialized skills and activities, or leadership, leadership skills and community service, and you have something in there that really is related to what this person might like. That's a connection. So anything that you can really put in through your extensive research that you're doing with when you're doing your networking, and when you're talking to people and you're getting it, just really think about how can you make the best case for yourself, and how can you help your resume to really pop. Let's see. Okay, so we are at questions here. For a job you've been in for more than 5 years, what's a good number of bullets? Oh, funny. Um, I think it depends on how relevant it is to the job that you're going for. Is it like directly whatever? But I'm not a big fan of the like bottomless list of 10 bullets under one thing. I like to at least categorize them so that it's not so, because otherwise it just gets like really, really long. So for most positions, I generally say, two to, I mean, 5, 6, but it could be more. Depends on how, like I said, how relevant it is to what you're going for. But just try to avoid having those long laundry, the where it's just so many bullets. Sometimes you can combine the bullets, or think about what ones are most important for this job. Like, you have your master resume that has everything, and that's great. I don't care if you have 20 bullets on your master resume for a job. That's great, because you'll know what to pick from, and you'll be able to pick those that are most relevant. Great. And then let's see, Kia. I always have a category of languages and countries I've lived in and or worked in near the top, because it pertains to if it pertains to the kind of work that you're looking for, i.e. international, right? Development, something that's international based or whatever, then absolutely letting them know that you are, skilled, you know, um, I would probably put some of those one of the transferable skills, or one of the skills in your like specialized skills or key qualifications, something about cross-cultural and skills and integration in within diverse communities, and something like that could really be very strongly said based on Peace Corps and your other experiences, it sounds like. So great. And excellent. So wonderful. Are there any other questions? You guys have had some really good questions. Thank you for bringing them out. And I hope that I've gotten them all. I'm kind of trying to scroll through. There's one coming here. If you're open to looking to relocate, Melissa's asking, where would you put this? Yeah. Or would this go in your cover letter? I've definitely seen in a resume where right up on the top, where it has like your address and all of that, where it would say, open to relocation, or, to get that point across, especially if, you're living in one place and you're applying for a job in another, area. So you definitely could put it there. Do you have thoughts on that, Ron? Have you worked with people that have, put willing to relocate, or have you recommended they do that or not?
Well, one thought is to, besides on a cover letter, on the resume, say, planning to relocate to your city.
Yep, exactly. Relocating to San Francisco, March, whatever, when it is. That's great. Yep, awesome. And that helps with that whole being local kind of thing, right?
Right.
Great. Kia, just send me an email if you would. I'm happy to share, the PDF of this if you want. Just send me, and it is obviously it'll be on, the recording as well. But if you want as a PDF, I'm happy to provide that. So just let me know. Okay. Should a resume and LinkedIn match? Oh, that's such a good question, Allison. Thank you for asking that. And it's funny because it can, but technically, like, your LinkedIn is supposed to be your area where you can be more creative, and you can actually be a little more, when you're describing your work, you could actually use full sentences, right? Whereas, in the resume, we talk about those fragment sentences, bullets, all of that. So you can kind of show your personality a little bit more in your LinkedIn. When you mean match, the information that's included should match. There shouldn't be like, inconsistencies where the years and the whatever, that should all match. But doesn't mean you have to, copy, or should even copy and paste your content from your resume into your LinkedIn. No. So you can kind of, yeah, you can have more flexibility with that. And I would actually look at the LinkedIn profiles of people that are working in your desired profession, and people you've, done, you want to do career chats in. One of the things you can do when you're researching to go in for that, or to have that career chat virtually or in person, is look at their LinkedIn page and see where they've been, and then plan out a few questions to ask them about that. They're going to be impressed that you like took the time to learn about their, like their work, and like, and want their opinion, and people love to generally give their opinions, right? So yeah, so excellent. All right. So I think it looks like that's all. Is there any other? And you're welcome to. We certainly have a size we can, if you want, if you prefer to unmute and just ask me, that's fine too. But so if anyone does have a question, feel free to do that. Otherwise, thanks everyone. Have a great night.